I couldn't believe my ears. As I mingled with relatives at the family reunion, I overheard Rick, my brother-in-law, snickering with his friends. "Once I get that idiot sister-in-law out of the way, the family business will be all ours." A sinking feeling gripped my stomach. Rick had always been arrogant, but I never imagined he harbored such malicious intentions against me. I glanced across the room at my husband, Alan, laughing with his parents, oblivious to the venom spewing from his own brother's mouth. Later that evening, as Alan and I tucked our son, Oliver, into bed, I found myself at a loss for words. How could I shatter the illusion of our perfect family? Oliver's innocent eyes brimmed with love, and I couldn't bring myself to burden his young mind with the harsh reality. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle shifts in Alan's behavior. He grew more distant, often lost in thought, and our once effortless conversations became strained. I couldn't help but wonder if Rick had already planted seeds of doubt about me. One night, Alan broke the news that shook me to my core. "My parents think it's a good idea to invest in Rick's new venture. He's got a solid business plan, and they believe it could be a game-changer for the family." I tried to reason with him, expressing my concerns about Rick's motives, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Alan's unwavering trust in his family blinded him to the potential consequences of such a risky investment. As the weeks passed, the strain between us intensified. Oliver, ever perceptive, picked up on the tension, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber silence. I couldn't bear to see my once happy family crumbling before my eyes. Desperate for answers, I confided in my closest friend, Samantha. Her unwavering support and objective perspective provided the clarity I needed. Together, we began gathering evidence of Rick's past misdeeds, slowly unraveling the web of lies he had carefully constructed. With each damning piece of information we uncovered, my resolve grew stronger. I knew I had to confront Rick, to expose his true nature before he succeeded in tearing my family apart. The stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined, but I was determined to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. In the following weeks, Rick's influence over my in-laws grew stronger. He painted me as a manipulative outsider, hell-bent on undermining the family's legacy. With each conversation, his poisonous words eroded their trust in me. "Marla's been filling your head with nonsense," Rick said during one of his frequent visits. "She's threatened by my success and is trying to sabotage the business deal." Alan's parents nodded solemnly, their expressions a mixture of concern and doubt. It broke my heart to see the once unshakable bond within our family fracturing. At home, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Alan, swayed by Rick's persuasive lies, became increasingly distant and argumentative. "Why can't you just support me on this?" he snapped one evening, after I voiced my reservations about the investment. "It's a fantastic opportunity, and you're letting your personal issues with Rick cloud your judgment." I recoiled at the harshness of his words, feeling helpless in the face of Rick's insidious machinations. Oliver, ever the sensitive child, retreated into himself, sensing the tension that permeated our once happy household. I ached to shield him from the turmoil, but the cracks in our family's foundation were becoming too prominent to ignore. "Dad's been acting weird lately." Oliver confided in me one night as I tucked him into bed. "Is everything okay?" I forced a reassuring smile, stroking his hair gently. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything will be all right." Even as the words left my lips, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. How could I mend what Rick had so skillfully torn apart? Desperate for a glimmer of hope, I clung to the evidence Samantha and I had gathered, determined to expose Rick's deceitful ways. But with each passing day, the task seemed more daunting, as his lies enveloped my family like a suffocating shroud. One evening, as Alan and I sat in stony silence over dinner, he dropped a bombshell that shattered what little remained of my optimism. "I've decided to go ahead with the investment," he stated flatly, avoiding my gaze. "Rick has assured me it's a solid opportunity, and my parents are fully on board." My heart sank as I realized the extent of Rick's manipulation. He had successfully driven a wedge between Alan and me, exploiting my husband's loyalty to his family for his own nefarious gains. "Alan, please," I pleaded, my voice trembling with emotion. "Can't you see what he's doing? He's using you, using all of us for his own benefit." But my words fell on deaf ears. Alan had made up his mind, and Rick's influence had taken root too deeply. As I lay awake that night, the weight of the situation bearing down on me, I knew I had to act decisively. Rick's treachery could no longer be tolerated. I would expose him, no matter the cost, and reclaim the family he had so callously sought to destroy. With Samantha's unwavering support, I doubled down on my efforts to expose Rick's true nature. We pored over financial records, scoured through emails, and followed every lead, no matter how small. Our diligence paid off when we uncovered evidence of Rick's embezzlement from the family business. Invoices for non-existent expenses, suspicious wire transfers, it was all there, meticulously documented, painting a damning picture of his greed and deceit. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I confronted Alan, determined to make him see the truth. Rick has been stealing from the company, I stated bluntly, spreading the evidence across the kitchen table. He's been siphoning funds for his own gain, and now he's trying to drag us all down with this bogus investment. Alan's brow furrowed as he examined the documents, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "This can't be right," he muttered, shaking his head. "Rick would never do something like this." I could see the internal struggle playing out on his face, the desire to trust his brother-in-law warring with the mounting evidence of betrayal. "Open your eyes, Alan," I pleaded, my frustration mounting. "He's been manipulating you, all of us, from the start. This is just the tip of the iceberg." For a moment, I thought I had finally gotten through to him. Alan's gaze met mine, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, his expression hardened. "This is just another one of your schemes," he spat, pushing the documents away. "You're so desperate to turn me against my own family that you'd resort to fabricating evidence." His words stung like a physical blow, and I recoiled at the venom in his tone. How could he still be so blind to Rick's machinations? In the days that followed, the tension in our household was palpable. Alan and I barely spoke, our interactions reduced to terse exchanges and icy glares. Oliver, sensing the rift between us, retreated further into himself, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber silence that broke my heart. It was during one of these strained silences that I noticed a flicker of doubt cross Alan's face. He had been studying the investment paperwork, his brow furrowed in concentration, when suddenly his eyes narrowed. "Something's not adding up," he murmured, more to himself than to me. Seizing the opportunity, I approached him cautiously, pointing out the discrepancies I had noticed. The inflated projections, the questionable financial backing, the inconsistencies in Rick's pitch. For the first time, I saw the scales begin to tip in my favor. Alan's unwavering faith in his brother-in-law wavered as the evidence mounted, and the cracks in Rick's carefully constructed facade started to show. The arguments that followed were intense, with tempers flaring and voices raised. But through it all, I clung to the hope that Alan was finally seeing the truth, that the person he had trusted implicitly was nothing more than a master manipulator driven by greed and selfishness. As the dust settled, a newfound determination took root within me. Rick's deceit would no longer be tolerated, and I would stop at nothing to expose him, even if it meant risking the fragile bonds that remained within our fractured family. The next family gathering was a tense affair, with undercurrents of mistrust and animosity simmering beneath the surface. I could feel Rick's eyes boring into me, his smug expression a silent challenge. Mustering my courage, I approached him as he mingled with his cronies, the evidence of his misdeeds clutched tightly in my hand. "We need to talk," I stated firmly, my voice carrying across the room. Rick's eyes narrowed, but he quickly plastered on a false smile. "Of course, dear sister-in-law. What seems to be the problem?" I handed him the stack of documents, my hand trembling slightly with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "These are records of your embezzlement from the family business," I stated, my voice unwavering. "Proof of your lies and deceit." A hush fell over the room as heads turned in our direction, the weight of my accusation hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, Rick's composure faltered, his eyes widening ever so slightly, but he quickly regained his footing, letting out a dismissive chuckle. "Really, Marla? Falsifying documents now?" He shook his head, his gaze sweeping across the gathered family members. "This is just another one of her pathetic attempts to undermine me." I opened my mouth to protest, but Rick cut me off, his voice dripping with contempt. "Don't think I don't know what you're up to," he sneered, taking a step closer. "You're threatened by my success, by the respect I've earned within this family, so you resort to these petty tactics, trying to turn everyone against me." My hands clenched into fists at my sides as Rick's words washed over me, each syllable dripping with venom. I could see the doubt flickering in the eyes of my relatives, their allegiances wavering. Alan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Marla, is this true? Have you been fabricating evidence?" The weight of his question hung in the air, and I felt the eyes of the entire room upon me. In that moment, I realized the enormity of what was at stake, not just the exposure of Rick's deceit, but the very fabric of our family's trust. Swallowing hard, I met Alan's gaze. "No," I stated firmly. "Every document, every piece of evidence is legitimate. I would never stoop to such levels." Rick scoffed, but I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word. "Look at the records, Alan. Look at the wire transfers, the bogus invoices. It's all there, plain as day. Rick has been stealing from the business, from our family, for years." A heavy silence blanketed the room as my words sank in, the weight of the accusation hanging thick in the air. I could see the conflict playing out on Alan's face, the struggle between his loyalty to his brother-in-law and the nagging doubts that had taken root. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "I need proof," he said, his voice low and measured. "Concrete, irrefutable proof of what you're claiming." A surge of determination coursed through me. If proof was what he needed, then proof I would give him. "You'll have it," I promised, my gaze unwavering. "And when you do, you'll see Rick for the liar and manipulator he truly is." As the gathering dispersed, the tension lingering in the air, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. It was time to take the gloves off and fight for the truth, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was palpable as the family gathered for the emergency meeting. Accusations had been hurled, loyalties tested, and the once solid foundation of our clan had started to crumble. Rick strode into the room, his cocky demeanor a stark contrast to the somber expressions of the others. He shot me a smug glance, as if taunting me to make my next move. Alan cleared his throat, his expression grave. "We're here to address the allegations made against Rick." I could feel every eye on me as I rose from my seat, clutching the recording device in my trembling hand. This was it, the moment of truth. "I have proof," I announced, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. Proof of Rick's deceit and his intentions to undermine this family for his own gain. Rick scoffed, but I pressed on, hitting the play button on the recorder. His voice, smug and self-assured, filled the room. "Once I get that idiot sister-in-law out of the way, the family business will be all ours." A collective gasp rippled through the room as the damning words echoed off the walls. I watched as the color drained from Rick's face, his mask of arrogance slipping away. That's not what it sounds like," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. But the recording played on, each sentence a nail in the coffin of his lies. Been siphoning funds for years. Bogus investment turned the family against her. By the time the recording ended, the room was deathly silent, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the air. All eyes were fixed on Rick, the once untouchable golden boy now exposed as a fraud and a manipulator. Alan's expression was one of utter disbelief, a mixture of anger and hurt etched onto his features. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. Rick opened his mouth, no doubt to spew forth more lies, but Alan held up a hand, silencing him. "No more," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You've done enough damage." In that moment, it was as if the scales had fallen from everyone's eyes. The web of deceit that Rick had so carefully woven was unraveling before our very eyes, and the true depths of his betrayal were laid bare. One by one, family members rose to their feet, their expressions a mixture of disgust and outrage. Even Rick's most ardent supporters couldn't deny the damning evidence. "You're finished," Alan's father spat, his face twisted with anger. "Get out of my sight and never show your face here again." Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his once smug demeanor reduced to a pathetic display of stammering and denial. As he was unceremoniously escorted from the room, his protests falling on deaf ears, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. The battle had been long and hard-fought, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. Yet even as I basked in the victory, a pang of sadness tugged at my heart. This was my family, fractured and torn apart by the very person who should have been its strongest ally. The road to healing would be long and arduous, but I knew we would walk it together, stronger and wiser for the trials we had endured. As the dust settled and the adrenaline began to fade, I turned to Alan, our eyes meeting in a silent exchange of understanding and shared relief. The worst was over, but the real work was just beginning. In the aftermath of Rick's stunning downfall, the family was in turmoil. Loyalties were divided, with some still clinging to the belief that he had been wronged, while others rallied around Alan and me, determined to excise the cancer that had festered within our ranks. Rick, however, was not one to go down without a fight. Bitter and vengeful, he launched a campaign of lies and manipulation, attempting to turn the tide of opinion back in his favor. "She's been plotting this from the start," he hissed to anyone who would listen. "Marla's always been jealous of my success, and she saw an opportunity to take me down." His words were like poison, seeping into the minds of the more gullible family members, sowing seeds of doubt and mistrust. But I was no longer the meek, passive woman he had once dismissed. With Alan's unwavering support and the weight of the truth on my side, I pushed back against Rick's slander, countering his lies with irrefutable evidence and heartfelt pleas. "Look at the facts," I implored our relatives, laying out the paper trail of Rick's misdeeds. "He's the one who betrayed us, who put his own greed above the family's well-being." It was an uphill battle, but slowly the tide began to turn. Those who had once been swayed by Rick's silver tongue saw the truth for what it was, and their allegiance shifted back to the family's side. Still, Rick remained defiant, his desperation mounting with each blow to his crumbling facade. It was during one of these tense standoffs that he crossed a line, threatening me with veiled implications of violence. "You'll regret this," he snarled, his face twisted with rage. "No one crosses me and gets away with it." I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated by his hollow threats. But Alan, ever the protector, would not let such an affront go unanswered. In a blur of motion, he lunged forward, grabbing Rick by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "Don't you ever threaten her again," he growled, his face inches from Rick's. "Or I swear, I'll make you regret the day you were born." The raw fury in Alan's voice sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't deny the swell of pride and love I felt in that moment. This was the man I had married, strong, loyal, and fiercely protective of those he loved. Rick, for once, was rendered speechless, his bravado crumbling in the face of Alan's righteous anger. It was a pivotal moment, a symbolic shifting of power that left no doubt as to who held the moral high ground. As Alan released his grip, Rick slunk away, his tail firmly between his legs. It was a humiliating defeat, witnessed by those who had once revered him as the golden child. In the days that followed, the family rallied around us, offering their support and condemnation of Rick's actions. The once fractured clan was slowly mending, united in their determination to move forward and leave the toxic legacy of betrayal behind. Yet, even as the dust settled and a sense of normalcy began to return, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rick's story was not yet over. He was a cornered animal, backed into a corner of his own making, and I knew from experience that such creatures were capable of lashing out with desperate, unpredictable fury. But I was no longer afraid. With Alan by my side and the truth as our shield, we were ready to face whatever Rick threw our way. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. With Rick's deceit exposed and his influence over the family shattered, Alan and I turned our focus to restoring order and trust within the business. It was a daunting task, made all the more challenging by the lingering doubts and divisions that Rick's machinations had sown. We pored over financial records, untangling the web of lies and cover-ups that had been woven over the years. Each discrepancy, each hidden transaction, was like a dagger to the heart, a stark reminder of the depth of Rick's betrayal. As the true extent of the damage became clear, Alan's parents struggled with a deep sense of guilt and shame. How could they have been so blind to the deceit unfolding right under their noses? "We trusted him implicitly," Alan's mother confessed, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. He was family, and we never imagined he could be capable of such treachery. It was a sentiment echoed by many, a collective reckoning with the harsh reality that even those closest to us can harbor the darkest of intentions. But through it all, Alan and I remained steadfast in our resolve to rebuild what had been torn asunder. We held meetings, both formal and informal, to address the lingering concerns and doubts that had taken root. With patience and understanding, we listened to the grievances of those who had been swayed by Rick's lies, offering reassurance and a path forward. It was a slow and often frustrating process, but gradually the cracks began to mend. Trust, once shattered, was painstakingly rebuilt, one honest conversation at a time. As the business stabilized, we turned our attention to the legal ramifications of Rick's actions. With the evidence we had gathered, the authorities had no choice but to pursue charges for embezzlement and fraud. The day Rick was taken into custody, a hush fell over the family. There was no joy, no sense of triumph, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. Family bonds, once cherished, had been irreparably severed by greed and deceit. In the aftermath, we sought solace in professional counseling, recognizing the need for outside guidance to navigate the complex emotions and trauma we had endured. It was a humbling experience, but one that ultimately brought us closer together as a family. During one particularly poignant session, Alan's father broke down, his stoic facade crumbling as he confronted the depth of his own culpability. "I should have seen it," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have protected you all from his poisonous influence." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of empathy wash over me. For all the pain and turmoil Rick had caused, he was still a part of this family, and his actions had left wounds that would take time and care to heal. As the weeks turned to months, a sense of normalcy began to return, tempered by a newfound appreciation for the bonds that had been tested and ultimately strengthened. Alan and I found ourselves drawing closer than ever, united in our shared triumph over adversity. It was during this period of healing and growth that we made the decision to renew our vows, a symbolic gesture of our unwavering commitment to one another and to the family we had fought so hard to protect. As I stood before Alan, surrounded by the loved ones who had weathered the storm alongside us, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. The road had been long and arduous, but we had emerged from the crucible of betrayal stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. In the months following our vow renewal, the family business began to thrive once more, the dark cloud of Rick's deceit finally lifting. With honesty and transparency at the helm, we regained the trust of our partners and clients, and the company's reputation was restored. Yet, even as we celebrated our professional successes, there was a deeper, more personal victory that filled me with a profound sense of gratitude. The strength of our family bonds forged anew in the crucible of adversity. Gone were the days of whispered secrets and veiled accusations. In their place was a newfound openness, a commitment to communication and understanding that had been sorely lacking before. I would often catch Alan's parents sharing a knowing glance, their eyes shining with a mix of pride and relief. They had come perilously close to losing everything they held dear, and the lessons learned had left an indelible mark. "We're lucky to have you, Marla," Alan's mother confided one evening as we sipped tea on the patio. "If it weren't for your strength and perseverance, who knows where we'd be right now." Her words, spoken with such sincerity, brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had felt like an outsider, forever seeking acceptance and validation within this family. Now, at last, I felt truly seen and valued for who I was. Oliver, too, seemed to blossom in the newfound atmosphere of trust and stability. Gone was the somber, withdrawn child who had borne witness to the family's turmoil. In his place was a vibrant, confident young man, secure in the knowledge that the bonds that held us together were unbreakable. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he whispered one night as I tucked him into bed, his eyes shining with admiration. "You never gave up, even when things looked really bad." In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and love so intense, it threatened to overwhelm me. Through it all, the lies, the betrayal, the darkest moments when hope seemed lost, Oliver had been my guiding light, my unwavering reminder of what truly mattered. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, our family settled into a new normal, one built on the hard-won lessons of the past. There were still moments of tension, of course, as old wounds took time to fully heal. But we faced them head-on, with open hearts and a willingness to truly listen and understand one another. And through it all, Alan remained my steadfast partner, my rock in the storm. His unwavering love and support had been the bedrock upon which our family's redemption was built, and I found myself falling deeper in love with him with each passing day. It was on a warm summer evening, as we sat side by side on the porch swing, watching Oliver chase fireflies in the twilight, that I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The battles had been fought, the demons laid to rest, and we had emerged victorious, our bond stronger than ever before. "Can you believe how far we've come?" I murmured, leaning my head against Alan's shoulder. He smiled, his eyes filled with a mix of joy and hard-won wisdom. It wasn't an easy road, but it was worth every step. And in that moment, as the fireflies danced around us like tiny beacons of hope, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A family united, resilient,